I want to see how this is going to look around the spinner area. What we're doing, we're picking this up from the previous tape. We're making some cosmetic changes to the, I guess, the new 1998 I-beam ship. See, what I need to know too, Bob, accurately, I need to know this dimension in the middle so I can lay out the middle wings of the rib. The ribs in the wing. I need to know if this is going to look right or if it's going to look too fat or too skinny or what. So let me get a piece of Mylar and we'll lay this sucker right out.
Yeah. Okay.
Here of doing this in full scale is I want to lay out the mounts, even though I don't have the mounts cut the right size. The mounts themselves will be an 1/8 inch wider. That'll carry through to the hinge line, and I'm assuming this is going to look okay straight, and then from here back, the fuselage itself will be an 1/8 wider, which will make for a more rigid tail, and also a wider, more scale-like rudder. So this, again, is a significant cosmetic change to the plane. You got a straight edge drawn. We're not going to change the nose moment of the plane at all.
Let's see if I got this square on here.
And I think I know a real cute little way of doing this. Everything we do is cute.
Okay.
Okay, if you... Now these are Cardinal mounts. These are 3/8 by 5/8. Okay. But I'm going to make them 1/2 by 5/8, but this will give us the top view. So lay out a mount in full scale.
5/8 wide and 1/2
5/8 wide by 1/2 inch the other way.
Okay.
And just draw a mount in. And these will be hollow box mounts anyway, so. Okay, now if we, knowing that that's the end of the mount, if you loosen the tape and slide this out, you can draw the whole fuselage in. In other words, you can move the center line over this way and then move the center line this way, and you can draw the whole fuselage side in one shot. Leave the crutch, that's it, and draw the motor pads in too, so we know where the motor pads are going to be, because this is what I'll work off. This is easier to work off of this than working out in midair.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have a set cut, and even if I did, the grain is going the wrong way on these. You want the grain always a sandwich. So what I'll do is I'll have Gajewski cut me some special mounts with his precision macho saw. Being he just bought a Brodak Nobler kit, I think he'll be in a mood to cut some motor mounts.
For you, yeah.
Yeah, do me a favor for a change. Gajewski, you're okay. I don't care what they say about you. There you go.
Okay.
Okay.
Actually, that's should be there. There.
But rather than having to retrace everything, now, am I right or wrong? Because we've added 1/8 of an inch to the mount. If you slide this over,
Whole thing over 1/8 of an inch.
you can retrace. You can even trace. Forget the spinner. You could leave the spinner in place right now and just recalibrate that in, because we know it's going to be more of a different shape or whatever you call it.
Okay.
And I'll have to make all new molds and mounts for the cowl and everything. That's no problem at all. In fact, I even have another idea for a more scale-like cowl for this, so it's a little more on the scale side. Now, if we get this, you want to do this with tape, Bob, or are you just going to measure it with a ruler?
I'm just going to slide this over, right?
Just go over 1/8 of an inch.
Okay.
And that should give you the whole curve of the fuselage in one stroke of the pen.
This is going to be... Are we lined up here, Ken?
In other words, the whole...
Very, very close.
Okay.
The whole fuselage will be 1/4 of an inch wider total, 1/8 on each side.
I think that
Okay.
you have to move this end over, your end over just a hair.
Okay, to me.
That's
Okay,
probably
now do you want to drag the sheet that way just about a 1/16? A little more, okay. Okay, how are we looking here for? I want to be a little more forward, don't I?
This will tell you when you're right. When that line lines up, you're right on the money.
Yeah.
You've got it. There you go.
1/8 inch?
You've got it. You want me to hold this end?
Yeah, all right, now I'll get some curves on there.
Okay, that's right on the money. All right.
Just hang on to that for a second, Ken.
Nice pencil sharpener. Bob Martens, before he leaves, he promises to clean the ink pens. Even Brodak was impressed with how nice those pens work.
It's amazing the things Wendy gets his friends into.
Hey, could be worse. Could be worse.
Tom Sawyer of Model Aviation.
Yeah, right.
That's a neat analogy. I like it.
Yeah, right. Okay, this is straight up to here. This will change, Wendy, because you have another
Yes.
half-inch.
Yes. I was figuring pretty much you could steal the whole shape.
Well, we'll get
And we need to make another change to this, maybe, Bob, is the ribs from the flap hinge line to the motor mounts need to be a straight line. You can't have a taper in there because that rib that runs along one of the I-beam ribs, you don't want to have it in at a 10-degree angle.
From here?
Yeah, in other words, we got to maybe make the change. Whatever thickness it is here, right at the hinge line, it needs to be the same thickness. The same. You know what? You understand why? Because that last rib is going to come right up against the body.
That's 1 3/8.
Put it back to the other side now.
All right.
Is this a good way to do it, Bob?
Yeah,
It's legit?
This will work.
Now, if we maintain that dimension from here, that's my biggest concern, because I want to build a wing knowing what this dimension is.
Yeah.
Knowing that we have the fuse side and all that stuff. I don't want it to be off by 1/8 of an inch and have to fill it in with ribs and spackle and everything.
Yeah, I'm right on this end.
Okay, 1/8 of an inch for what we're
Yeah.
supposed to have.
Yeah.
Money. Alright, now this is going to be straight back to here. And we said inch and 3/8.
See, I can anticipate with the wing being the way it is and the tail being a lot more scale-like, that not to do this to the body would be a sin. And this will tell me how wide the flaps have to be at the middle of the fuse too.
There's going to be room in the cockpit for those.
Yeah, we can get a fatter. We can get a fatter pilot, and he can have 2 pizzas in the cockpit.
I went to the dollhouse store. I found little cans of Budweiser.
Oh yeah? Great.
Yeah, Ken's going for the beer look.
A little cup holder to put your butt
Yeah.
in.
Yeah.
Velour seat covers.
I'm going from cigarettes to all the sin.
The fuselage side, double or combination on there, and that'll be the final solution here
Final frontier.
to our problem.
The final
And we only need to have that dimension right back to the hinge line right there. And that gives me the reference for the 2 middle ribs on the wing. And that should really be a big help. Because without that,
Okay, now do you want to adjust that?
We made.
yeah, I want to adjust it the other way, put the other fuse side on
Yeah,
here.
Why don't you?
You just want to skip this?
Yeah.
I don't even need that. I don't need that.
Okay.
Because this has got to change maybe an inch longer anyway.
The whole tail moment's going to change and everything. When you put the scale tail on, there you go. Line that up. Draw me a line there, baby, and we are in. And this way I can still use the same spinner. I can use the taper. It'll just have that more scale-like
A
look.
little bit. I'm a little bit
Okay.
too far out here.
We're trying to get in the nose section here.
It's off the horn.
At the last, behind the engine,
There we
if
go.
this dimension and the dimension at the horn is the same, I think that'll give me everything I need to know. Because I'm going to put the carbon fiber the whole length of the fuselage, just like on both of the planes. They're going to be the same,
Well, that do.
except it's going to be wider.
Okay, now let's center that back up, Ken.
Center it back up and let's see what it looks like.
All right, now you've got extra material you can sand the car.
I can contour this, and when I make the blisters and the exhaust manifolds,
Okay.
that'll be fine.
All right.
That'll be in the bank. Right now, you're in the bank.
So are
Mention, even though this is wider, this top is going to have a little bit of a, I'm guessing 1/8 of an inch. Which will make the blisters up even higher.
Like
Oh man, macho.
And then when you do that, when you add that down here,
the bottom gets
you
more
cover up
scale.
more of- yeah,
Right, more of the motor will get covered up. I can make this curve here a lot more of a...
more like a real Spitfire.
Because the side view will stay the same. It's only that the top view, it's only getting wider from the top view here.
Handle a whole lot of that.
Bob, I think you got it.
I'm looking for my case for my...
So the day's work was, and part of it of course is on the tape before this, is getting the ribs laid out, the spar piece laid out with all the rib stations. And we're, oh man, having that tail piece made is such a big help. Closing in on pizza time. That's the main thing.
Fly as good as my first one, you don't think?
It'll fly great, because we know everything we know about this one now. It'll have all the updates on it, all the extra little features. There's no way it cannot fly, Joe. It's just that this one is better than the first one, and the third one will be better than the second one. It's going to happen. You don't even have to think about it.
Cameras at home when I come back east. I left the goddamn Nikon sitting at home. This is what was... You know.
Should have said something. I'd have brought a couple of them.
See, this is all it takes. If you're really bored at night and you're thinking, you're feeling sorry for yourself, you figure, hey, why not just go become a drunk? You can pull this guy down and say, hey, there really is life after death. See, that tail, that's going to be a major thing, having that tail the right shape. And having that wider body, the big wide body option. Not a bad cockpit. Not bad. Next one will be better. More switches. John Brodak sent me this thing for doing rivet heads with ink pens. What a great little tool. I got to show you. You didn't see that yet, Joe, did you? The little thing for doing Zeus fittings and... Oh, my own.
Hey, Bob. Move around to that side.
Yeah, everybody's doing a photo
Drop
shoot
your
here.
camera for a second. Way to grab this baby. You don't want to grab it by the open wing bays or the
No.
string tail. That's for sure.
No.
Even when it's
Next year's plane will be unbelievably more awesome. We need to go to more awesome. That's all there is to it. This one is too mundane and plain.
Yeah, right. This is going to be a tough act to follow.
This is
you know?
boring. That's like Evel Knievel used to say, one thing about my job, you don't have to practice.
That guy is a real clown.
I think it's pizza time. What about you guys? Is it time for pizza?
We're ready.
Oh man, I'm out of here. Now, last night I went out to the garage, even after Ken left, and gave this one extra coat. Ken's been putting some coats of clear on this in between, I don't know what you would call it, working on the plans yesterday. But anyway, this is dried up really overnight in the cold, and I'm surprised. It looks like it's relatively dry. And when he put the shrink dope, he put one coat of shrink dope out over the tissue. In fact, you can see the edge where it's doubled, and that's a significant thing. He's got the tissue out over here. And then when he put the dope on the leading edge, the no shrink dope, it came out over here. Now, you're always going to get a little bit of bowing in the leading edge unless you use wood that's way too hard or way too heavy. So to deal with this, now one thing you would not want to do is take a hard sanding block and sand this with a block, because you'll be weakening all the edges. That's a mistake. We need to make up a soft block for doing the leading edge. We need to make up a contour block, a block with a reverse curve for getting our leading edge nice. I can use a sanding block on the flaps, and on a trailing edge I really don't want to use it, even though I probably could, because this is a webbed spar. I really could, but I'd like to use the soft block. And the reason is, and this is a significant thing to understand, you're not going to change the shape of this material anymore. We're past the point where we can change the shape. What we're trying to do now is get a finish on a shape that's already there. And if you have that concept in mind, one of the ways you can kind of get a little bit ahead on the system, cheat the system, whatever you want to call it, is I'm going to try to use 220 sandpaper now on this, which is kind of rough. And as soon as I see I'm into the tissue and I'm picking up little hairs of tissue, I have to stop. I also need to clean out that hinge line. That's a major thing to get that nice. Now, of course, if you had removable surfaces, that would be a no-brainer. Anyway, looking down at it, it looks like it's in perfectly true form. It's shrunken up equal. So without further ado, and I believe me, this is the part of the time that you really have to kind of knuckle down and say, well, I'll spend the time and the energy to get this as nice as it possibly can be. I want to do, I always like to clean out the hinge lines and clean all the dope off of the, there's always some slimy dope on the lead out wires. Clean that off so I know if I'm binding on one of the hinges. You know, when you use this system of building with the flaps already in position, there's always a little bit of extra work doing it this way. If I get that doubled over sandpaper in there every time I paint, or every time I sand I should say, I'll have a real good chance of maintaining a nice even clearance. Now if one of the gaps is a little too big, it'll tend to fill with dope, and if one is a little too tight, in case this one here is a little too tight, I may need the machinist ruler for this one. There it goes. I need to just work each one patiently, and then get into each hinge pocket with a nice XL blade, get right in there. All these little details, they may seem like, at this point in time, well, we're under no pressure to go out flying, that's for sure. This plane is, the way the winter's beat us. We've been beaten badly by the winter this year. Usually because of the renovation on my house and other things, I've really not gotten ahead. I'm usually, by this time, I have a plane half in silver or at some other much further along station, but it's not a problem. We can play come from behind football. That's not a problem at all. In fact, it's exciting to do that. And we're going to probably not be able to go as fast as we'd like because we're going to be putting Ken's shop together. We've already gotten a bunch of benches for that, bunch of furniture, and that's going to be kind of an exciting project, we'll be able to document how to make foam wings, how to sheet them, how to do the landing gear clips. Ken has plans for doing some fiberglass wheel pants. He's already put out a bulletin that he's sending out to people. So if anybody's really interested, give Ken a call. And before the video's over, I'll try to get his phone number on. I'm going to try to include it in with all my normal customers. Anyway, these lines, that's the first thing I want to get straightened out, because then I can work the controls nice and free, get all this dope off the push rod. Then I can start working all those semi-smooth areas. Now in a couple of spots here I've run into where this is really a little tight. This is 220 folded back, where the sandpaper is kind of getting sticky. And what I've noticed, maybe, oops, there it is again. If you start going at this very aggressively, you're almost guaranteed the sandpaper is going to fold back on itself and make a gouge. So I've been real careful before I get too aggressive that the sandpaper is still staying in that hinge pocket. Then I can kind of bend it forward, kind of bend it back, and get that radius on the trailing edge, all at the same time. At some point in time, that sandpaper will just slide in there, and then you know you have it. Now this is another one of those spots. It's a little time consuming doing this, and I always get the feeling anyway, oh boy, all this time I'm spending to do this, all this detailing early on. I'm only going to paint over this with filler and everything, but believe me, if you do this, maybe even every other coat of dope, clean out in those hinge pockets with a nice brand new blade, get in there, probe away at it. You can see the way it comes out kind of chewing gummy, because this really is soft. It just takes a little time detailing each one of these out. It also, that's why I like to do the hinge lines first. I like to see that my controls are nice and smooth. And if I do have a bad hinge that needs replacing, you know what? I want to replace it now. I don't want to get the thing in silver and then have to replace a hinge because it got epoxy on it or dope or glue or who knows what, atomic waste. This stuff, all this little detailing, it just, a little time, a little energy. And the final result is it really does look nice. The tip that I use, and these magnifiers, for doing hinge pockets, because even with my little glasses, normal reading glasses, it's difficult to see down in there and see exactly what you're picking away at. With the magnifiers, it makes it a piece of cake. If you don't have a set of these magnifiers, and you're older, you're old. You got to be old if you're flying stunt. Kyle Freeman's the only young one left in the world, and Brian Kiefer. Anyway, and Dondi, of course. But the magnifiers are a big help. Now, it just happened that I was out in Home Depot yesterday, and I was looking at potential Christmas presents, and I saw this little detail sander that has about 100 little tadpole attachments. And I pointed to Karen and I said, hey, nice Christmas present. That's what I'd like to have. So let's hope she thinks I've been a good boy. Hey, I have been a good boy. What am I talking about? But picking away at these little things, the magnifier. This thing here, worth its weight in gold. If you never used one and you have eyes that you wear glasses, you'll kiss me when you see how nice it is to work with this. Now, of course, the other thing I want to pay really close attention to is get all the edges radiused and smooth, so that as soon as this is pretty much ready for some filler. As soon as I get some filler on here, it doesn't, I don't go right through it when I have a razor edge here. You can see how sharp these edges get. And if you don't radius them, you wind up at one of those little imperfections. All of the edges. These old Bud McKnight sanding sticks really come in handy for this. So you can cut them in half. Make excellent little sanding tools. Area they work real well on. I take the edge. I can get in on the hinge line on both dimensions. I can reverse it and just get up here a little bit too, to get a radius on all these little corners. Another little detail area, because I'm going to have a fillet going up on a fuselage here. I'd like to have a nice edge, nice radius, straight edge to work off. These little plywood caps go a long way toward making that happen. Again, the old sanding sticks. Boy, I'll tell you, we use these for everything. And that little eraser that John Pothia sent seems to clean them right up. Maybe we've stumbled upon something there. Nice thing the sticks are, if you just carefully dress off each edge, go right around the whole perimeter of the wing. The edges, always, Joe Adamusco used to always tell me the thing he liked about my plane was the razor edges. Now, I don't know, I never think of it that way, but nice edges always seem like part of good workmanship. And just check for any spot. Now, if you were to gouge this or ding it, a little thin CA, you'd bring it right back up to where it was a hard surface. And always check with your hand. Always, your hand is the final, never look at it with your eye. There's always one thing, I always like to get that dressed off as nicely as I can. Radius as much of it as I can. So even the little details like the pushrod outlet, I'd like to get a nice little radius on them. In fact, on a profile, you're going to see the pushrod. Hey, didn't even think about that. Not used to building profiles, I guess. Again, you can make a little template out of balsa wood or cardboard to check that your leading edge is the same. This I've sighted it and it looks real close. But before I go and finalize this with some filler, I'll check that I have the same radius there. I used to have this nice little round tadpole that used to be exactly the right radius. It isn't around the shop anymore. No idea where it is. But if you have it, return it. I want to just dress each one off. I'm not trying to sand this down and change the shape. Just get all the fuzz off. Just so it's smooth to the touch. Move on to the next one. With 220, you're really putting some cuts in this. Now we're going to have to go back out to the garage, of course, and put extra around all the edges. I don't want to sand real hard until I get a lot of extra material on there. At this edge here, again, I'm being real careful. There's not enough dope right on the edge. If I was to sand that edge will pop right up. I'll be repairing bays. As soon as this sanding is done, I'll get out there and start getting extra coats of dope on that. That's a critical thing right now. This is a sanding sponge, and if I wrap sandpaper around it, I get a nice flat contour on this. Again, I hope Karen gets me that sander. Hey, even just to try it out. I'm picturing things I can use it for already. Imagine if the Black & Decker made a sanding machine you could sand wings with or something, and you just plug it in and kind of walk away. I don't think it's going to happen. Oh, it is. A rough spot right there. At this point, I won't be sanding the tissue areas at all. In fact, I want to get more dope on this. Just going to do a gradual sanding on this. You don't want to get to the point where you're rushing this part of it. That's for sure. Now there's ice in the pond, so it's below freezing. Oh, it's cold out here. We're going to have to put a little bit of extra thinner in this dope to start the next coat. Here's our outdoor thermometer. Looks like about 28, 29 degrees. Now, believe me, see my breath out here. I want to get all the edges, wherever the silk span ends and the open bays begin. In fact, it's so cold out here today, the fluorescent lights didn't come on, so I doubt if we're going to be able to shoot much footage in here. Boy, remember the good old days when we could paint in the house, and you don't appreciate being able to paint in the house until you lose it. But anyway, it does look hopeful, hopefully, that we're going to be able to get the shop over by George's, set up maybe within a month or so, and our whole program will change. We'll have heat, just like tenants who pay the rent. Anyway, you get the idea. We've done this a million times. I'm going to give this a coat, maybe one coat every hour for the whole day out here. Meanwhile, I want to get inside. Oh, it's so cold out here, it's unbelievable. I want to get inside and start making up that mold for the, or at least make the plug up for the wing spar for the I-beamer. And the trick is, if you just get on maybe 10 coats like this, 8 to 10 coats an hour apart, that's all it's going to need. Okay, it's time to start laying up or trying to see what potential problems we're going to run into in laying out this carbon fiber spar. I want to start with, needless to say, with a clean table. I've been thinking about a lot of different ways of doing this, and the first thing I have to really decide is what am I going to use for a base for the mold. This is going to be a 61-inch mold, so I need a nice, strong, solid base. Remember all those blocks we weighed up? We had about 40 or 50 of them, I think. I've got them weighed in order of weight. Well, guess what? We'll take the 2 heaviest ones and see if that'll give us what we want. These are 1-inch balsa blocks. I want to make a nice butt joint here. So again, I'm trying to hold it at 90 degrees. And then I'll put some side plates of plywood on here. Again, it's kind of an odd shape for a mold, but we're working off a flat glass table, so this should give us a decent joint. I'm just trying to get a little butt joint on here, and then I'll try truing off the edges. I'm just letting the dust fill in the gap and trying to get a nice level seam here, even though this isn't going to be a strength seam. Those old sanding belts glued to the table, they come in so handy. This is just another example, because I want this to lay perfectly flat when I'm doing the layup. What I'm really trying to make is the base for a mold. Now, if I had a piece of aluminum this big, a piece of steel, actually I could make it right on a table if I wasn't going to use it over and over again. I'd like to start off with one side reasonably flat. I want to get a nice finish on the side that I'm going to use to actually make the mold. Again, how handy it is to have these sanding strips, sandpaper glued right to the table. Picking up some plywood. Nice little plywood supports. I have it laid out flat on a table, of course, because I want to maintain this nice level plane that I've established. Again, making the base of a mold sometimes is the biggest pain in the neck of everything. And I hope that'll hold it in good alignment for the whole time that I'm using it. Now I want to get a real accurate center line right down this piece of wood, even though I'm not concerned with the edges right now. This is one of those Pilot fine line pens, so I can get a real accurate make sure that in the center, perfectly straight. Okay. Okay, now with a center line on here, I can accurately lay out full size where the spar from that piece that we made on the previous tape that we hope is going to be real accurate. Should be able to lay out the 4 quadrants. Now it's just a question of laying this out in the 4 quadrants, and then we'll know exactly where this piece of the mold will be fitting into our little molding program here. Now with this piece, this is what's nice about having real accurate stuff. And I got to thank Bob Martens and Joe for a really good day. Actually, we've had some really good luck. Laying this out here makes it kind of bulletproof. Okay, now we got the base made up full size on 1-inch blocks, and the next thing to do, of course, is to lay out the plug, make up the plug for the mold. Trace this out on 3/32 balls, so each spar half, obviously I'm going to have to join them in the center. That's not a problem though, because I want more material in the center anyway. I'm still actually at the point where I'm still trying to decide exactly how I want to do this. This all sounds so easy, and you go through it in your mind, you go back through the steps, trying to figure out exactly how you want to do it. Anyway, I have to make 2 of these with the flip-flop from the piece that we originally made as a quadrant piece. Okay, now we have the mold base and the 2 pieces that'll drop in, cut out of 3/32 wood with a real accurate center line on them. Now the trick is to join them with a real accurate center line. Oh, I can line this right up using pins. Actually, I only want to have pins on one side. Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, what that allows me to do, when I make up the center support, I can run a ruler right on this piece and make sure I have a real accurate center line. Okay, right on, honey. Yes! I'm home! Okay, I'll be right up. My stepdaughter's here. Now I'm making this little splice while it's right in position. While the pins are holding it in good alignment. And I'll be able to trim this off, hopefully, and this will add a little more meat to the center of this part. I've really had some good luck using this cutting mat. I'm trying to find some new applications for it. And this is an XL part, and it's really a tool I'm sorry I didn't have years ago. Anyway, I have my splice on here, and I want to true this all up. Now I want to get that center line across the brace. This is for my own reference, of course. Now I have my base plate, and I have the part that I just made, which is part of the plug. And I'm going to look for any spots where there's a variation or where it's a little different. Something not right here, something I want to adjust. It looks real good, but now if I had a high spot, let's see, it looks like there's a little high spot right here, maybe just the slightest little bit. And now I have another advantage in the fact that I can take this part, flip it over, and it better line up the same way. When I reverse mirror image it, I better have the same shape on both sides. That looks real good. Just one little tiny variation in this that I'm not totally satisfied with. It's probably from me not cutting it perfectly straight. Okay. Sight down there and see just how nice and straight it is. And by reversing it, I can see that it's perfectly symmetrical, so I don't have one wing wind up thicker than the other. So confirm, now that I've got all of this done, again, there's never too many redundancy checks. That's why I wanted to have this real accurate when Bob drew it. And all 4 of the quadrants look within a third of a pencil line. And this Pilot pen, it's a pretty thin pen line. Okay, I don't want to go any further until I have this part dead accurate, and I know it's as accurate as I can possibly make it. What I'll do is push pins through in a few spots right on the center line so that I'll have a center line on both sides of this. It's for my own reference. Get at least 2 or 3 spots so I can line up the little dots. And by using a 48-inch ruler that I know is dead true, I can get the center line on the edge. On the end, there's the top. There's the top. The Pilot pen is so much better than using ballpoint pens. It's really worth investing in one. It really takes a lot of fooling around to get this right, but it's really worth it. What I'm trying to calculate out is for the caps, I want the upper cap to be 1/4 of an inch. So I took some 1/4 inch squares and I want to strip off 3/32. And when I'm all done, in fact I ought to do a little test. I want to make sure that the piece I strip off plus this, not counting that centerpiece now, plus this is 1/4 of an inch. Kind of a crude way to do it, but it'll work. Just break a little piece off. I want this top piece to be exactly 1/4 of an inch when I'm all done. Okay. So I have to take into account a 1/64 off of this. This little piece here, I just need to strip off just a very little bit. I'll probably do that with a knife. I just want to take a sliver off of this so that I can maintain that 1/4 of an inch distance. Because what I'm going to try to do is make a little tool for cutting those notches in the ribs. And I'd like them all to be 1/4 inch so it has enough of a footprint up into the rib, especially in the middle where it's going to take the most strain. Now I have this piece pinned in, and I'm trying to make sure I get a nice true edge across the top. In fact, this one is not so good. And I want to make sure I have 1/4 of an inch all the way down. In fact, this will be. I'll true this up. Okay, I got one piece on. Now, needless to say, I'm going to repeat it 3 other times. And I'll have the whole spar capped, and the maximum width across the whole part that's going to take the stress will be 1/4 inch, and then I can start tapering it. Sort of a, well, trying anyway, to get that 1/64 sliver off and get it off nice. I try to set the blade on a plane to a 1/64. And that worked real well. And the next thing I want to put is a thin layer of CA across the whole cap. And I want to dress these edges off. Now you might be thinking, why not just use this as the spar? Well, even if you ran carbon fiber over it, I don't know that it would be strong enough. I don't think so. And when I make the mold, I can fill the mold with end grain balsa and carbon fiber. Something that I couldn't really do. I couldn't really stack end grain this way. It would have no way of staying true, and it would be a lot heavier. Now this is a nice wing spar. I'm also going to beef it up in the middle here, and I haven't decided exactly how I want to do that. But the next thing is I want to true these edges up over on the sanding table.
One more. Okay. You really do have a great son. I hope someday when I'm old, my son will be happy to Really, he's a good guy. He's a pain in the ass, but he's good. That's absolutely true. And I would say the same.
This is where the gear are actually going to end. I'm going to have the spacers for the gear are going to be right here. So based on that, this is the part I want to double up. And by adding more material to the plug, what will happen is I'll have more room in a final mold for the carbon fiber, of course. Measured in 2 inches from each side of the spar to make this doubler. The idea being I don't want to have a stress riser. I don't want all of the doubling to end in one area. I want to kind of spread it out. And this will also give me a good spot. It'll be nice and beefy in the center to mount the landing gear. So now obviously what I'll do is I'll just duplicate this part. So I'm going to have to cut the center out for the bell crank. So this gives me plenty of extra material here. Just give me a reference so that they're both even. Again, I don't want to have all the things end, all of the doubling end. I want it to gradually taper out toward the tip, not have any step where it would be a stress riser. I want to get that glued in and get the other one glued in right above it. So I'll have from the center out, everything will gradually taper. I want to get these down to where they're both 1/4 of an inch. Again, so that the widest spot on the spar will be 1/4 of an inch, and I can make a tool to cut that slot. Okay, now this is going to leave me enough room in here for the bell crank throw, both dimensions, and then I just want to flatten this off so that this will be my bracing. Now what I did, I laid this out in increments. Each spacing now adds an inch. Each time I laid a spacer out, I added an inch to the dimension because I need less strength as I get out to the tip. So I divided it where each bridge will add an inch. I've just been laying these out just as little braces to keep, because this is really going to be some very thin carbon fiber, just to get some bracing in there. Okay, with all the staggered pieces in there, well, it's hard to tell. It looks like I've got it right, but that doesn't mean I have it right. We'll see when we cast one of these up, and if we need to change it, needless to say, we can just cut a little rubber out of the mold. That's another way we can do it. But by getting them closer together, I think that's the right idea. Again, I'm trying to get rid of all the stress risers if I can. I got a block, let's see, a sugar block with a little curve in it, just to dress this off a little bit. Now the next thing, I'm going to tack glue this piece right in place, right on the original block, which will then be the bottom of our take-apart mold. Now, the last thing I want to do is seal this up with some epoxy. And I'm going to try to hit it with a hairdryer. The reason is I just don't want to see all the grain in the final mold. And then we can put this aside to dry. This will probably be it for today. Anyway, I don't even try to pretend to be like a professional mold maker or anything, but I'm trying to figure this out as I go. And for all the people that have been with me through all the failures, hey, I have to tell you, learning is fun. Learning is always, I don't know, something special about learning. Now, what this should do is leave a relatively nice surface for me to pour the rubber off. I don't even have the rubber in house, I have to buy some more. It'll also leave a little radius around all the edges, and what that radius will help me do is to pull that's a little too hot, I'm getting bubbles. When I pull a piece apart, it'll be a big help, because everything will have a reversed radius out. Okay, that first coat of epoxy is drying on there. Gonna let that sit overnight, and we'll probably sand it out and see if we can put a little nice finish on it. Some kind of nice finish anyway, and then that'll be our plug for the mold. See you tomorrow. Okay, this morning everything looks like it dried up nicely. Had the heat on real high last night. Everything is a little rough and chunky here, so I guess the first step is I want to sand this out before I go any further. Just see if this is going to cut real nice now. Oh yeah, that's ready. You know, when epoxy is cured properly, and this I cured with a heat gun, kind of sped up the cure. When it comes off like powder, you know you've got it. This will sand right out nicely. And I want to dress all the edges off, all the corners, because this is what's going to give me, this sanded edge is going to give me the final finish on this. Now in some of these corners, I can take advantage of this. And what I did the first thing this morning is I went outside and got some dope on that cardinal wing, so that can be drying up while I'm working on this mold. I still need to buy the rubber to make the mold, so it's going to be a busy day. And I guess one of the things I always think is I always want to try to rush making a plug for a mold. But then when you think of how many parts you can make from it, in other words, when I'm sanding one part now, I might be sanding 20 or 30 of these that'll get made over the course of my lifetime. Anybody that ultimately wants to make an I-beam, well, an I-beam anything, you could use this same spar, assuming you use the Spitfire ribs. You could also think about, as an example, having a a profile Spitfire or something. Who knows? You never know where life is taking you. It's an adventure. If you know where you're going, it's not really an adventure. And I guess it's possible you could live life and never really live at all. Never really have the fun of model aviation. Can you imagine? Anyway, it is fun. What am I talking about? That is powdering off beautifully. That is really coming out nice. areas where you can be creative with these little sanding blocks. Anytime you're making any kind of a plug for a mold, it really does pay to do it right. Now, I had a very interesting little conversation, not a conversation, a letter. I have to return a conversation. Ed Gallagher would like to build a Cardinal with a fiberglass body, and he seems willing to make the molds for the fiberglass body. So, boy, does that open up a nice little area if we could get some of his ideas, some of his technology. See, that's what I like about this most of all, is just the sharing. Because without that, if you're just building and it's redundant, you're doing the same thing over and over, making one plane exactly the same as the other over and over, I don't know how exciting that could be. It's more exciting to me when each one's, I don't know, just a little different. And that's what was so good about having Bob Martens and Joe here. That really, that kind of a day, you go home and your head is spinning. You have so many ideas. And it looks like I'm getting a beautiful head cold from being out in that cold garage. Karen, if you only knew. She's worth it. This shape, tadpole shape, has worked real well in getting in the corners and maintaining a nice radius in there. Boy, I hope I'm not getting sick. People working on a Spitfire project are not allowed to get sick. That's the law. Now getting this edge real nice, of course this will be to support where the ribs go. I like to spend a little extra time on that. Before I put the next coat of resin on here, this is, again, I want to build up a substrate on this that's nice and smooth. It'll make for a nice clean release. It'll also make for a nice part. Anticipating that possibly other people will be wanting to use it. Leroy Black for one. Boy, I'm choking to death. I may have to pack it in early today. Anyway, get the mold nice and clean. I'll mix up another batch of resin. What I'm going to do is put a little bit of dye in this next coat of resin so I can see exactly where my high spots are or things that I'll want to refinish or sand more. We'll dust out of this area. The reason for the dye in the epoxy, this will give me a little bit of a head start when I sand this coat out of seeing what the high spots are. And obviously white would be the worst. If we had Sig Silver it would be good, of course. Black will always be the best. Black will always show the mistakes first. Now this is Z-epoxy finishing resin, hoping this will leave a nice smooth coat. Now keep in mind, each time we're putting in a coat like this, the plug is getting that much bigger, so I have a couple of real good ideas on how to take care of that. I want to fill this with upright end grain balsa. Again, I'm getting ideas as I go along. I guess this is the way even real planes, real engineered, real 747s. I don't think so. I can't picture Adamusco and Martens doing this, but it works, and it produces a part that you can use. That's the whole deal. And boy, if Ed Gallagher makes up a Cardinal glass fuselage, I'll certainly make up a wing. Maybe we can get one of Ken's foam wings, in fact, as a test bed for the fuselage and the wing at the same time. A lot of interesting stuff coming up. And of course we hope the most important of all is getting that little Cardinal finished so John can make the kit if he chooses to, or can sell the plans, or whatever he wants to do. I think that's going to be a cool little plane. We're just going to put this away to dry overnight. See if I can recover from this cold. Hey, what a mess. Anyway, this will need to be sanded out, maybe not. We don't know what kind of surface we're going to, but I still need to buy the molding rubber anyway. Now, I'll bet you this is something even you don't know, and I hope John Brodak's not going to be embarrassed that I say this. I talked to John the other night, and I was telling him, you know, the music that we play in the background here, we try to vary it just to break up the monotony of being in here 15 hours a day. But I did like oldies music. And John, look, he sent me a whole bunch of tapes here. He says, hey, that I look old enough to appreciate. Well, you don't know, John. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, what's really funny, I didn't know that John Brodak was a DJ. Check it out. Now, so from time to time, we're going to be playing these tapes. From time to time in the background, you'll hear the DJ talking, and you know it's John Brodak. He's got that well, I don't know what, accent or whatever it is when you live in coal mining country. Anyway, John, I appreciate it. We will be using them, and hey, maybe you could use me as a guest DJ some night. Look at this, he's a DJ. Brodak's DJ service, I love it. Anyway, thanks a lot, and look in the mail, John. I'm going to get even. I'm a DJ, too. Bud Burroughs sending this picture from 1969. It's an old black and white picture. I'm looking at the wing and thinking, I guess he was thinking of a Spitfire or something here. I'm sure Bob Palmer would love this. Anyway, Bud, thanks a lot. He also sent me a tape of VSC, so I have some VSC footage now from VSC 8. Thanks a whole lot. Listen to Brodak. Brodak the DJ. I love it. Anyway, I went up today to the art supply store and bought the last of the RTV rubber. This was, where the hell's the price? It was expensive. It wasn't cheap. I'm glad I know what I'm doing here. Here, here's the price right here. $131. It was $140 with the tax. But anyway, it looks like we're going to have enough tomorrow. I want that epoxy to dry. And tomorrow, with the help of DJ Brodak, we're going to lay up that mold. Boy, I love this music. Music that builds Spitfires by. Hey, thanks again, John. Really appreciate it. Nah, everybody knows my Christmas fetish, making up little ornaments with planes on them. My whole tree is decorated with little ornaments. I pretty much have one for all the planes I used to have years ago. I think that's a cute little thing to have on a tree. Hey, Shara, good, here's another one in here. Look, she buries the thing on me. 1990, 1991. Every day I come up here, check out my village, check out all my wife's little handiwork before I go down to the shop. And it's time to go down and let's see how that spar is drying up. back down to the shop where I hear John Brodak music playing. Hey, we're enjoying the tapes, John. Thanks a whole lot. Hey. See, these are the little things you would never get to know. You know, you're not going to read about this in Flying Models, you know. Listen to this DJ John Brodak. I love it. I love it, John. That's great. Yeah, and I'm Elvis, too. Just kidding. Elvis. Hey, I am Elvis. That is me, you know. Now listen, John, just because you have all this old music, I want to tell you something. I'm a Jackie Wilson fan. I want you to make up, look at a place I have. These are the 2 kits that Brodak gave me. I want to have some tapes of all Jackie Wilson music. I never see them in a store. Jackie Wilson, hey, Christmas is coming. A couple of Jackie Wilson albums will be great. Now that wing has about, gee, I guess 10 coats of dope. It's gassed off to the point where it doesn't stink, but I got it up by the heating vent, of course. I have all that extra dope around the cap strips and edges. So what I'm trying to do here, as far as time management goes, is flip-flop back and forth now, using the time that that's drying to work on this spar. Now this dried up. I put another coat of epoxy on this last night, and this will probably be ready to sand out. Yeah, there's the little bubbles and imperfections in it. I want to get that smoothed out. So the final casting, and believe me, this stuff is expensive. You don't want to waste it. When I make up the casting, the final casting, molding, whatever you want to call it, it'll be have as nice a finish on it as possible. Just this part alone is consuming a lot of time, but hey, it's going to be the heart and soul of this new Spitfire. All right, Brodak, if you're such a good disc jockey, play some fish music. Play some music to be a fish by. Music to eat by. Now the trick with sand and fiberglass, this is 180 grit paper, by the way, and Windex. The trick is not to let the material clog up the sandpaper. And all this is to get these little dimples and dots out. And be very careful. I'm going to be very careful. I don't want to sand through. I don't want to get down into raw wood. I just want to smooth. This is just a smoothing of the surface here before I lay up to do the pour of the rubber. Yeah, and this part of the job, making a plug, no matter what it is very, very labor intensive. And actually, I'm still not over this cold. I've been taking so many of these cold medicines and everything, but coldies and all, you really don't feel so good. But you know what? Work has to go on. Work must go on. You got to be a tough guy. You have to be a DJ even when you're sick, right, John? You tell them. Anyway, doesn't take long. It looks like it's going to come, and it looks pretty decent, in fact. See, I'm being real careful. I don't want to get down into where I'm down into the raw wood. You can see how quick that goes, though. It doesn't take long to get a really halfway decent finish on this. Now that wing getting dried up over there, I'm getting a little itchy to sand that out and get some filler on it. Anyway, I'm getting one of these done at a time. Just a little time consuming getting them done. But they're coming out nice. As soon as I see I might be going through. Oh man, you're sanding away. President Nixon, stay in the grave. You believe this phone is unbelievable. Oh. I'm finishing this up with some 4-0 steel wool to get in all the corners and edges. The steel wool gets in the corners and edges a little better than the sandpaper does. Again, just to put a nice finish on it. decent finish on the plug. Now this molding rubber that I have, this is a new formula, new branding. Guy talked me into. I hope this is going to work as well as the old stuff. The problem is the Dow chemical stuff that we were using, the Dow, has gone up in price about double, and this is the substitute that we're trying to use. Hopefully going to be able to use. I don't believe this is unreal. This must be the world's record for phone calls. They get in the edge. This is the most difficult part of all, because I need to get right in that corner. And as you probably guessed, we're getting blown away because of Christmas with people calling up here. This is typically when every wife in the world wants to buy their husband something. I don't know what. A doll, probably. Anyway. We're in a Christmas mood here, that's for sure. I just want to make sure everybody understands on a molded part like this just how much work goes into making the plug. But the good side is once you have the plug, you're pretty much ready to go into production. We can make this, once we have the mold, we can make this part over and over again, maybe in a matter of an hour apiece. Thing's starting to look like a big tune pipe, isn't it? World's longest tune pipe. The key is that it's powdering off. Now the old sock and Gorham's trick, and you can always tell buffing up epoxy, it never comes up like lacquer, of course, but you can get some of the gloss up. It'll make for a nicer part, and of course this is one of the things we want to have as a decent finish on these parts. For any that we sell, we don't want to sell something that looks like sandpaper. But the good trick, even if you're buffing out a plane, is the old sock on your hand. Save all your old socks. A little nicer finish than this, anyway. And we're going to go. We're going to put PVA over this anyway for the mold, so this will give a real nice gloss. Okay, we're ready to build up the little barrier on this, and I guess ready soon we'll be able to pour it. It's a lot of work making this, just labor intensive. Look how big this thing is. Amazing. Not a bad finish, but certainly not going to win the concourse with this mold, but I think that'll be good enough. Next thing now is I'm going to leave about a 1/4 inch perimeter so that the rubber will go around the edge. I'm taking some, I guess this is 1/4 by 3/8 here, and building up a little bridge on it so that it eventually is going to wind up like a little bathtub that I can pour the molding rubber in. I'll block off the end, and I'll seal the whole edge when I'm done. The pins are a nice thing to hold it in place while you're gluing it too. Now the idea here is to get a seal too, so I want to make sure I get this to kick off. Make sure I have a seal along the edge. And needless to say, I'll just repeat this 4 times and then block up the edges, and I'll have my little edge made. pins are really great. John Pothier turned me on to these pins, and they really work. For this kind of project, they're great. Okay, I got the whole box made up. Now I need to true this edge up. I want to get a perfectly true edge because I want to make the reverse, what will be the base for the rubber. I want to make that piece, and I want it to be sitting on a perfectly flat area. Now this is where having this nice big piece of sandpaper on a table will give me a nice edge. Now the reason I want that edge nice and smooth is when I seal this, I want that, I don't want to have the rubber all oozing out of there if I can help it. Okay, I put a nice coat of PVA on this. That's the mold release agent. I'm not really sure I'm even going to need it, but it does add to the quality of the finish. Now I want to join two blocks, and I try to get the next two heaviest ones. I'm going to get the ends all squared up, trued up, and CA'd together and make little side pieces, because that will become the other half of the clamshell on the mold.
Tell that John Brodak to stop playing music. Give us some Clams Casino. To hell with a clamshell. Hey Brodak, we love your music. Clamshells? Clams Casino sounds better to me.
So what I did, I'm following one of the lines on the table to make sure I get this as straight as I can. And of course I've dressed off this edge about 20 different ways. I'll tack it first. And I'll put those little side plates on it. Just like the other part. Then I'm going to have a bottom and a top to this mold. Not many handier things than having that sandpaper glued to the glass. Give us a nice joint to work off. Now I'll figure out whichever side is the smoothest for the top. Take a piece of scrap plywood, and obviously I'll make two of these. Trace this out. Piece of 16 plywood and glue one to each side. That'll give me another side of the clamshell. Now the only thing left here is to wait for the PVA to dry. I may even put another coat of PVA, and usually takes an hour, hour and a half to dry, especially under these conditions. And that'll be ready to pour the molding rubber. But in the meantime, I got a little bit of time. I guess I'll work on the mail. You never want to put this together till that PVA. Again, the purpose of the PVA is it puts on a nice glossy coat, more or less. The other thing that it does is some of these molding rubbers tend to stick to wood, and they can be unpredictable, to me anyway. So this, a little coat of this, it gives you a little insurance that you're going to be able to get the mold apart with the minimum amount of effort. Now while I'm waiting for that PVA to dry, I want to get a little bit of detail work, some sanding. You can see how this is dried. It's ready to be sanded out. It's got a little bit of a gloss on it. And that's what I want to see before I put the first coat of filler on. I want to get this sanded down. Dress off all the edges again. Actually, it looks like it's coming out okay. This really hardens up the middle of the body, that double tissue. That is definitely a good investment. And see, with so many different ways to build, being able to do this to the center of the body on a profile, it really gives it a bigger footprint, where otherwise you'd just be going into sheeting. This I hope will contribute to having a little bit more strength. Anyway, the tips even look nice. The other thing too, I want to go through, do the hinges again. They seem pretty free. I've been trying to keep the dope out of the hinge pockets. Let me just look this over. Anything needs some really fine tuning here. And all these edges have many, many extra coats of dope on them, so I should be able to start grinding away. Again, working on a padded table, a couple of old blankets and sheets. See the glossy finish that PVA puts on a part. But it still has to dry. In fact, I always feel comfortable letting it dry even longer. Usually it'll dry in an hour. But if that isn't totally dry, when you go to do this, oh man. So we'll work on that wing while we're waiting for this to dry. A couple of things. Usually when this has only been drying overnight, and because I've put so much on, I really have to be very careful here. I thought this was going to be a lot harder. Again, I'm wrong. But if I do a little test, and if this proves to turn into chewing gum, which looks like it might still be a little bit too mushy to sand, if that happens, what I do is I just let it sit by it. Now it looks okay. It really does have the look of, well, I put so much around the edges. And now I can work right up to those edges. You can see where it's unsanded, it's shiny here. Now all of a sudden it's, where I sanded it, it's dull. You can see the shine end, shiny ends. It's coming out. Actually, I really should let this dry another day, but I'll try to get some detail work on this. So, you know, this is just one of the things. This kind of sand out, I don't have to finish the whole wing right now. I can do a little bit of this, but it'll be a lot easier to sand tomorrow. But any detail work I do get done on it, it'll just save me time tomorrow. Now this is pretty much ready to go. I waited all day for this PVA to cure out. I have the top that's going to ultimately be the top of this mold once we fill it with liquid rubber. I'm going to clamp this together, put weights on it or whatever. I'm really not sure how I'm going to do this yet. We'll find out. Now the first problem is I don't know how much of this material to mix. And since it is so expensive, I don't want to waste any of it, that's for sure. But over and over and over I've read the directions. Shake well. I'll mix up 1 cup of this at a time. It has to be by weight. 10 to 1 by weight, so I better get the grain scale out. Okay, the first thing I did is weigh the empty cup. Let's get this back. The empty cup is 11 grams. Now I need to take this big pail and weigh off. I'm going to try starting with about almost a full cup. It looks like it's going to take 2 cups, but I don't want to mix any of this stuff that I don't need. Obviously, once you catalyze it, you're done. Now, I don't know if this is... It has the look of it's very thick and marshmallowy. Of course, it says to stir it before use, so I'm just taking a dowel and stirring it to stick. It looks a lot like marshmallows, though. Doesn't smell like marshmallows though. I weighed up the cup. It's 11 G's. Put 330 grams in there, minus the 11, gives me 320. Now I want to add 10%. That brings me up to 352. So I set the scale at 352, and then real carefully, and I mean you really have to do this. Oh, this stuff smells nice. There we go. A couple of tricks that I've found. I haven't used this exact molding rubber, but other molding rubbers, they all seem to be pretty similar. Is when you think you're done stirring it, you really still have to stir it a little bit more. And then from this first pour, I hope I can figure out if I need like 2 times this amount more, 1 time this amount more, or the color starts to get nice and even. But even after you're done, you still need to stir it. If you leave it and it's not totally stirred, you really make a problem for yourself. Anyway, starting to I'm going to stir this off camera for another 4 or 5 minutes. Pour it and then try to estimate how much more I need, and then I'll have the cups already ready. Do the calculation, try to get it all poured in at once so it kicks all at once. There it goes. It's starting to look, I guess, like what it should look like now. Now the reason for doing a mold where the plug is on the bottom is the air bubbles will rise to the top. If you stir this too quick, or if you try to take an egg beater or something to it, what you wind up doing is making all kinds of air bubbles, and it leaves little imperfections in the mold. This is just coming up on being okay, and I really don't see a whole lot of air bubbles in it either, thank God. Again, anytime you're working, this is an all new material. This is not like the Dow Corning stuff. You really need to do this a little bit, I guess a little experiment to get comfortable with it. And here's another little trick I learned is once you get this in, what's down at the bottom usually doesn't have, the catalyst can still be loose there. You can still see little spots where the catalyst isn't thoroughly mixed. So once you drop it into the mold, and it looks like we're going to need 2.5 of these, but you also might want to do this, is mix it right in the mold to get any white spots where you see the catalyst isn't sitting as smooth as it should be. And you can see already the air bubbles are starting to rise out of it. Yeah, we're going to need 3. So I'm going to go like hell off camera here to try to fill this mold up. Now just repeat this redundantly 3 times, and I should have it. Famous last words. This stuff really has an awful pungent odor though. Now I got all 3 of these poured in here, and I'm just kind of trying to find the low spots and the high spots, and before I put the clamps on this, looking for any white spots in the rubber that would mean that there's not enough catalyst, since I do have a little extra. Took 3 cups to fill this mold. In fact, there's a low spot right here. See, as I'm doing this, there's a little spot of white in there. That means the catalyst isn't mixed in as well as it should. This side's got a little more than I need. Any other low spot? I'm afraid to even drag this. No, it looks fine. Now the trick is when I put the clamp on this, what's going to happen, it's going to ooze out all over the place. You can bet your life on that. Okay. Here's where it gets messy. Line up the 2 center lines. Oh, you're sure to see some of this ooze out. Here it comes. Here it comes. What happens, it kind of pancake batters out here as we're closing it. I can go back and forth to try to get rid of any other little air bubbles in there. Okay, I'm just pressing it down on a nice flat table. Put some more gallon cans on this. Yeah, there's just a little bit of stuff oozing and drooling out of here, and I've been trying to scoop it up as I go along and making sure everything's in alignment, but it still looks pretty good from any angle. Now obviously we're going to give this 24 hours to dry, making sure it's centered. Thing while this is drying, tomorrow try to get the rest of that wing sanded out, and that also, by the way, gives it an extra day to dry. I got a little bit of it sanded out tonight, but the extra day of drying will do it a lot of good, so I guess I'll get the table prepped and work on this tomorrow morning. See you in the morning. Now today, because we've let this dry an extra day, it's powdering off about half of the effort it took yesterday. I did one panel yesterday, and then I really ran out of time is what happened. We're busy getting furniture for Kenny's shop, and we're going to shoot some video there real soon. Try to show the evolution of that shop as it goes from being a blank room to we have some furniture, we have some tables, and we're going to be making some stuff. That'll be part of our little video episode, part of our adventure. Anyway, there's still a couple hours of work to do on this before I can shoot the silver, and I want to get it sanded out. By the way, I don't know if I showed on it, this is a rubber block. They call it a sanding sponge, but because it has sandpaper on one side, it tends to hold the sandpaper in place. When you're doing this leading edge, you really can't do it with a hard block. This seems to work real well. And it's really good for where the cap strips join. Getting that little blend in there this is an excellent little tool for that. It's just about the right consistency. It's not like a styrofoam block is really a little too soft. And an ordinary sponge is too hard. But you can see, when you can see it powdering off, you know it's ready to sand. You can see where the double tissue joints, one joint, it's like a little step down. And I'm always trying to work on that area every time I sand it out. The sooner I can get that blended in that I don't see that line, the less filler it's going to take. And this definitely is ready for some filler. If we can get some weather, they're predicting 3 days of rain and snow. So if we have to, we'll put this aside to dry and work on some of the other. We could start cutting out spitfire ribs if it rains. And that's, I guess, part of the whole time management thing is always have something you're working on and something that's drying. Try to balance that off to get the most efficiency you can out of a building season. Now this is where it's real difficult to get if you don't have a fine touch, but with the block you can just kind of blend that edge right in there. And it doesn't take a whole lot. You don't want to cut the edge down. You don't want to cut that edge of that sandpaper, but just a few shots with the sandpaper. Now you can see here's a spot where I've gone through the tissue. There was a little, I don't know, a rough spot or whatever you want to call it. And what I did, I hit it with a little CA and just let it, so it hardened it up. And when I go to put the filler on, I'll put a little extra filler there. Or I could even put some of that green putty there. That would be okay. Again, one by one, going through each piece. Get the joint between the cap strip as nice as I can. Get the edge, but don't sand down onto the tissue. And every day that you let it dry, it'll powder off easier and easier. These little spots, and you tend to go through a lot early on like this. See, what happens, this stuff gets clogged up on the tip, so you right away, the first thing you do is get rid of everything at the tip. Get rid of this. And get down into where it's nice and thin. Get rid of that. You know, while I'm working on another panel, this can be drying. Any little spot that you sand through, or where it gets a little rough, right now is an easy time to take care of that. You can go around. There was a spot up here. Right here was a spot. Now I've been watching this this tape. I put this on already. Bill Harding's tape from Brodak's contest. It's got a real nice interview with George Aldrich for anybody that's interested. Get a copy of that tape from Bill Harding. I'm pretty sure he still has it. It's a relatively new tape. And it's the kind of thing that you can listen to it over and over again, and each time you hear it, you'll hear something maybe you didn't hear the first time when you're doing this kind of body work. You know, you just need some background noise. Well, why not get an education at the same time you're doing this kind of stuff? It just takes time. He's got a nice dissertation about tanks, different things about low compression that Big Jim has advocated for years, head shape. It's amazing how much they have in common as far as agreeing on the setup for a stunt engine. Amazing to me. It's good information, especially the part about low compression for stunt. Not many flyers realize how important it is to have a low compression engine for stunt. That is a good tape, by the way.
Just plain fun.
Another good point there. Never pass up a chance to pick up good information for people that are knowledgeable about their life's work. Now I've got one side done. As I've said before, this is an excellent interview with George Aldrich on Bill Harding's tape. This is from the Brodak tape. Excellent information, and I can't get over how many things they agree on. The low compression for stunt motors, the excellence of Fox motors is just so much, I don't know what to say. It's an excellent interview. Worth the price of the tape just for the interview, even if you're not a control line buff. And definitely worth having a copy of the tape just for your own information. Again, this is the tape the interview is on, and it's from Bill Harding, Harding Aero Productions, 4782 Unity Lane Road, New Waterford, Ohio, 44443. Excellent tape. That interview with George Aldrich was excellent, by the way. Now, there's some interesting stuff about tanks on that tape, too. Interesting stuff from George Aldrich.
I simply don't understand when they tell me you got to raise the tank 1/8 of an inch above the horizontal, or above the needle valve, or off the center of the venturi on a profile, and to get an engine to run. It's got to be in the tank. The engine doesn't really know it.
Okay, we have one half of the wing, one side done. I'm going to let this kind of dry out. Take myself a nice little coffee break. This is really the base of what I hope will be a real nice finish. And within a half an hour, this will dry. Time I have my coffee and I can come back, sand this out. I want to finish one side of this before I go on to the other side. Now, it doesn't take long for this green putty to dry up. Yeah, I like to really finish one side of this before I flip it over, and I don't have a lot of high hopes I'm going to get this sprayed today, the way the weather looks outside. It really looks like a gloomy day, but you can see how it kind of powders off. And this is one of the steps that'll help you get all these little imperfections straightened out early in the program. Now, a lot of these spots needed 2 coats, and it's definitely better to give this 2 thin coats. I've just been going back and forth, take a little break, work one wing panel when one is dry, and work the other one. So I really want to pick away at this. I have plenty of time with the weather being the way it is. And this is part of what I enjoy about the hobby, is really getting as many of these little imperfections filled now, so that the first coat of silver, you're always disappointed anyway. but it minimizes the amount of disappointment you have in that first coat of silver. Just time consuming, it just takes time. Now I'm finishing everything up here with some 220, some 320. And I want to try to get some silver on this today. I don't know how I'm going to do it. The temperature out there is really cold. But we'll improvise something, that's for sure. Anyway, when that green stuff starts coming off like powder, usually a half an hour drying time is plenty. You don't have to, certainly don't have to wait overnight, and you want to finish by polishing everything up with some 320, that little sponge, until you have all the edges feathered in. Now, when we put the silver filler on this, that'll come right through as a high spot, so it's good that it has a nice deep color like that. I also want to take that soft block and get right in the hinge line, radius that edge, radius all these little crazy edges we have to work with here. Now I'm trying to dress off all these edges on the tip weight box also. The trick is to get the stuff sand just long enough, stand long enough that you can get a nice sanding on it. It leaves a relatively nice surface. It blends in kind of nice. Trying to get that edge right up on the silk span, nice and smooth too. Now when you get this all feathered in, it seems like you're adding a lot of material, but when you're done, you should have it feathered into it as almost nothing. In fact, if you weigh it on a gram scale, you do a whole wing, you shouldn't even be able to weigh 1 gram in terms of how much material you put on and how much you take off. But of course the trick is to sand it off. If all you do is trowel it on and don't sand it off, it's a whole different ball game. Now what I do too, constantly move the sandpaper, rotate it like on a clock, so you're always using a new edge to cut. So you can see it really does powder off really quickly and nice. Want to dress off all those edges. Okay, all wiped down with some M600 here, just a couple of old fingerprinty spots. I like to rub my hand, I can feel some little spots. You can rub your hand over any little spot you can pick away now. Now once the silver's on there, of course all the things are going to jump up and hit you. But then if you can get some of them out of here now, it'll just save you one sanding. Here's another little spot right up here. I've been trying to help Ken get a feel for. Most of this you have to do with your hands. Now what I'm going to try new this time is I'm going to take that silver filler and go right over the tissue and everything. Since this is something I'm going to try as an experiment, just to see if that does help eliminate some of the sand outs over the tissue. Now normally you have to sand it at least 2 or 3 times. We'll give that silver filler a try just to see if there's going to be any value in doing it that way. Now with the wing all cleaned up and ready to go, this is a typical scenario that happens around here. Check this out. I get ready to go outside and it's snowing. Oh, isn't this lovely? So what this is going to mean is I'm going to have to do a little remix on the filler, put a little bit of retarder in and play with the pressure and the retarder amounts until I can paint without making a mess, or just plain give up. Sometimes it's just better to give up. We'll see if this works. What I did, I ran a little test. I want to see how that silver is going to dry up. If it's going to get all milky and white, I'll put a little more retarder in. If it's going to stay that way for 5 minutes, then I know I got the mix pretty close. Cold weather, got to up the pressure a little bit, spraying out a thicker material. It's going to take a long time to dry. This is just something I used to do a spray test on. First thing, of course, I want to run a little test. I give this a few minutes to dry up because I don't want to put any more retarder in this than I have to. I have about 5% in there now. And if this dries up without turning milky white, I'll go ahead and paint the wing. I improvised a little bit. See, I wanted to get this up off the, see how it's sitting up off the sponge under the rolls of paper towels. Because what I'm going to do is do one side, then take a break, go for lunch. Obviously this is not going to dry in a half an hour, may take even longer. Then come back and do the other side. There's no reasonable way I can hold it and grab it and walk around, and snow is falling on me and everything here. So this is just a makeshift thing just to get me through this. Well, this can be drying. We're expecting 3 days of this stuff. So if I can get the silver on there and then the next day get it down in a cellar gas and off, I can be working on that Spitfire wing. Believe it, I got a raindrop on it. Actually, I'm probably too close to the door. The reason for putting it close to the door is to try to keep the dust out of it. Look, I'll get another raindrop. I have to move this back just a little bit. Because this is filler, it really won't make a big difference. Snowflakes are just floating in here. Cool, I'm glad that's over now. I'm just glad this will be drying for the next couple of days. Back into the house where it's nice and warm. Whew. Now, it's a nice little trick. What I did, I painted one side, let it dry, painted the other side, but then I want to get both sides of the silk span wet. See, here's what happens. The silk span relaxes when it's wet. So I wanted to keep both sides of the wing wet at the same time, so what I did is I hung it up on a nail and just put a second coat on everything, so both sides are wet at the same time. Now I kind of feel comfortable putting it aside to dry for a few days, and that's going to have to sit there. In this temperature, it'll be smelly and stinky for a couple of days, but we got a lot of other neat stuff to work on, so, working on it. Probably one of the things is going to be shoveling snow tomorrow. Anyway, been a good day. Now, believe me, there is nothing better after a day of painting out in the snow. Come back into the house, get me a couple of nice cups of hot coffee going, some Dutchy pretzels or some pizza, and I have 2 new books to add to my collection here. Ken brought these over, and one of them obviously is my Christmas present. I think he thinks that I'm going to give him a fish for Christmas. I gave him a fish for his birthday, one of my baby fish out of the pond. Anyway, he knows I love books, and this is one of the better ones. This is the time of year we got to get inspired. First off, the size of the pullouts are the size of my workbench. Great pullouts, all kind of. These are the little details that'll give you ideas for when you're going to do some modeling. And the detail on these drawings, oh man. I tell you, anytime I can add a Spitfire book to my collection, and I've got so many of them out on loan right now, I don't even know where some of them are. I asked 2 or 3 people that I know have one. This is the original rudder. And again, the reason for having all these books is when I'm sitting around having coffee, there's never anything on TV around here. $52 a month for cable TV, and there isn't one thing worth watching. They don't even have porno on the TV here. They have nothing. We have nothing. It's terrible. Wings, trains, and every once in a while a Reno air race, and the rest of it you could keep. Anyway, good pullouts. Details. Now, see, these are some of the details when I did the Spit cockpit. That little window, how many rivets hold it on, the backbone here. All of these little details, this is what we're looking for our new project. And I'm sure anybody that's coming along for the ride here, same thing, the cannon details. These are all the things, the Zeus fitting details. All the little things if you really want to go on to some super modeling, even the Siamese exhaust headers. So many choices. There are a lot of things. Hey, the little tail wheel, the detailed tail wheel. So many things. And it's these pullouts that and there's so many other planes. I mean, just this is what gets me about these books. I know these books are expensive, but just for an example, I know Joe Adamusco at one time drew up a little sketch plan for a Yak. This is a Yak 3. Look at some of the detailing on this. If you were going to do a Yak, hey, you could even use Spitfire exhaust here. Little intake on the root of the wing. Some of the little details. Anyway, this is what makes it so much fun to do Spitfires. This is what separates it from the sliced bread guys. Well, anybody that doesn't like P-51s, I mean, I don't know. They shouldn't be allowed to go to McDonald's. I mean, how much better than is it? It just doesn't get any better than this. When you need that little inspiration, you need that little kick in the behind to get going. And it's funny how so many people worldwide that I've spoken to have the same things in their mind, the same feelings about models. And they're really, at least in my experience, there hasn't really been a realistic way to express it in the past, except for, hey, really appreciate your model, but by being able to share this through photos and videos and books and, oh man, we've entered a new world of modeling as far as I can tell. And this is really the greatest way I know of to share it all. Even if you're freezing out in the cold all day, hey, you can even share that. Now, I'm not really into the German Air Force, but pictures are just unbelievable. Just unbelievably detailed. Now, if we could only get George to do some of these paintings, hey, he could be rich. Could be a millionaire. I know there's one artist that does most of this work, and it's beautiful. They even have the accurate color renditions, the camouflage in here. But it's the details. When you're trying to make a model, all these little... Now, supposing you were trying to make this model, and you needed to know what shape this scoop was, how does it attach with rivets, Zeus fittings, how does the cannon actually come out of the nose? How does that latch down? It's all these hundreds of little details that make these books worthwhile. Priceless. And they're just great for days when you're painting in the snow. Oh, I know this is Tom Morris's favorite, the old P-61, but some of the details even on this one. Now, if you were doing a P-61, and just think of the details here, this is what I love. I can hear Midgley now. Midgley's going to be looking at this and saying, hey, nice nose art. Always looking for nose art ideas. That's a good one. And what book would be complete without a P-40? This has those flattened off exhaust stacks like we made on the original Spit. Hey, the shark's mouth. So many things. One of the models I'd love to, if I have enough time if I have enough life left at the end of my life, make a nice semi-scale P-40. Nice camo job. So many nice things. There's just a wealth of information in these books. Nice nose art. Nice nose art. Rudder art. Now this is specifically meant to torture Bob Aronstein, who I know watches all these videos. Bob, finish the Mosquito. He's restoring a Cadillac, that he inherited. He didn't even buy it. Anyway, he's got a Mosquito with retracts. Bob, we could be flying this at next year's Nats. Hey. Another beautiful, beautiful. Oh man, so many nice models. The only problem is you run out of life. In the end, no matter how you organize it, you're going to run out of time before you run out of interesting models to build. And on that note, hey, I'll see you on the next video. I got to go warm up, read my books.